So today we have Dr. Morton. Dr. Morton is an English teacher at Oak Ridge High School in East Tennessee. She teaches ninth grade Inclusion English, 10th grade Standard English, and 11th grade AP English. Before moving to Oak Ridge and trying her hand at high school teaching, Dr. Morton was an associate professor of English and the writing program administrator at Tusculum University in Greenville, Tennessee for 10 years. She has authored a writing textbook and has a particular interest in the ways that writing enables students both to access power and to explore issues at justice and equity. So, Dr. Morton, can you introduce yourselves and just kind of tell us a little about your personal journey? How did you get involved with teaching?
Sure. Hi, I'm excited to be here with you guys today. How I got into teaching, when I was an undergraduate at the college level, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, as so many young freshmen do. And I took a class in 18th century literature, and I really, really loved it. I was a freshman at the time, and I took it for my humanities credit. You had to take a lit class. And so I took 18th century literature, and I called my mom and said, I think I want to be an English professor. And my mom, was very supportive, be whatever you want to be. So that was my goal for the next 13 or 14 years that it took to get all of the degrees required to be a professor. So I did my undergraduate, and then I went to the Philippines for a couple of years on a service mission. And then I spent 2 years on a master's degree, and then 5 years on a PhD. And then I got what I thought was my dream job at a small liberal arts college, teaching literature and eventually directing the writing program. And I really loved it. It was a really wonderful career. But about 5 years ago, I decided to go back to school. For whatever reason, I don't know. I just wanted to, and I could do it free through the university where I was teaching. And so I went back and did another master's degree in education. And as part of that program, I had to work in the public schools, in a middle school and a high school. And I discovered that I really loved it, that something had happened over those 17 years of teaching at the college level. And it became sort of less important to me to teach the subject matter and more important to teach kids. My focus became more on the students and less on the subject. And I loved working with the teenagers, and I felt that that there was more that I could do in the world, more that I could give if I were teaching high school than if I were teaching college, where really so much of your emphasis is on the subject matter, on research and publishing. And that's a world that I loved for a long time. But my focus has really shifted on sort of those relational capacities and those getting to know my students and trying to help them. And so 5 years ago, I applied to be a high school teacher, and here we are. So I gave up. I was in a tenured position. I was the director of a writing program, but I am not a bit sorry. I love teaching high school. It's been a good change for me. So.
Well, I think you're an amazing teacher. I've had the pleasure of having Dr. Morton as my high school teacher, and she was amazing. So if you have any questions, remember you can put them in the chat. But for now, I have some pre-submitted questions that I will be asking you. So our first question is, since you talked about the different degrees you got, can you elaborate more on the education needed if someone were to go into to be a teacher or a college professor?
Sure. So to be a high school teacher, generally you just need a bachelor's degree, and it will be in, if you want to teach high school, it will be in both, it'll be a mixed degree, half education and half the subject matter that you're teaching. A lot of teachers now, both because you get paid more starting out if you have a master's degree, and because if you do your bachelor's in an education, like if you want to be an English teacher, if you do your bachelor's degree in English education, then half your time is going to be spent in education classes and half in English classes. So you won't take as many English classes. So a lot of people now and a lot of programs are shifting to require or to encourage you to do first your degree in your field of study. That's what you get your bachelor's in. And then you get your master's degree in education. That way you wouldn't have to split your time, and you would have a stronger foundation in the subject matter that you're teaching. So a lot of people are shifting that way. I see us moving that way. I think most teachers in the future going forward will probably have a master's in education with a bachelor's in their subject field. And if you're interested in high school teaching, that is actually what I would suggest. But there are still some schools, lots of schools, where you could do the split degree as an undergraduate and get out in 4 years. To be a college professor requires quite a bit more than that. You would do your bachelor's degree in the subject that you're interested in. Then you'd do a master's degree, an MA, a Master of Arts, or an MS, a Master of Science, depending on what your subject field is. And that is usually 2 to 3 years. And then you would do a PhD. Now you can teach at the college level if you want to teach community college, or if you wanted to be an adjunct professor, although nobody really wants to be an adjunct professor. That's sort of the professors that are itinerant. They move from university to university and they don't get paid as well. But you can do that with only a master's degree. But if what you want to do is teach at a university, you really do want to go on and get your PhD. There are different kinds of doctoral degrees. But the PhD is the highest of those. If you want to teach at a university, you'll want that one in general. So that one that takes an average of 5 years. Some people, if they're really fast, can do it in 4. Some people take longer, but the average is 5 years for that one.
Great, thank you. So would you say that, like, for a high school, to be a high school teacher, like, because I know you have a PhD, so what do you say are some benefits of having a PhD for a high school teacher?
Most high school teachers wouldn't pursue a PhD. It's because I went at this in the backwards way, that I have that. Generally, if your goal is to teach high school and you want to do you want to go as far as a doctoral degree, you would do a Doctor of Education, a DE, instead of a PhD. And even then, you mostly want to do that if your goal is administration. Not a lot of high school teachers would go on and do the PhD or the DE. But if you want to teach, you generally do that if you want to teach at the university. You do get paid more, so that might incentivize some people. But in general, because it takes so long to do a PhD, as I said, is average 5 years. I think a DE is an average of 3 years. So you can do that one a little bit more cheaply. But in general, if you just keep teaching high school, it would take you quite a while to make up what you paid in tuition. So that's generally not a good reason to do it. You would do it because you love education or because you want to do some kind of administrative work.
Okay, thank you. So one question we have from the audience is, how did you go about choosing your university?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know that I always chose wisely. No, that's not true. When I was an undergraduate, I really wanted to go to a very prestigious university, and I've seen a lot of my students do this as well. I went to, you guys may not know it because we live here in the East, but I went to Willamette University, which in the West is quite a pretty good university. It was very expensive, and I had to take out loans, and my parents had to take out loans. And but I had this idea in my mind that I wanted the prestige of it. It was a good experience and I loved it, but if I could go back in time, I would probably choose a less expensive university. simply because at the undergraduate level, it rarely matters too much, at least, where you're going. What I would consider more in choosing an undergraduate institution are, do they have the programs that you're interested in? Are they in a region that you're interested in being in? Do you want to be close to home, or do you want to explore a region, different than what you're accustomed to? Is it you do want to consider the reputation of the university. You don't want to go to one that's poorly considered. But in general, most of them, I mean, if it's an accredited university, you'll be fine. Just make sure they have your program. So I would consider some of those things above simple prestige. Now, when you start doing your graduate degrees, especially if you want to be a professor, that will matter. You do want to do your master's and your PhD at well-considered universities, because you won't even get an interview often if it's from a poorly considered university at the graduate level. So you want to look at the U.S. World and News reports, check out what the rankings are. You want to look at what their job placement rates are and things like that.
That is really, really helpful. Thank you so much. So we have another question from the audience. It's a little long. Let's see. Okay. I have a friend that got a bachelor's in history and is looking to become a history teacher, but he has no teaching experience. Will he still be qualified to get a job as a high school history teacher, or does he have to get the master's in education?
Yeah, we are going through a teacher shortage right now, as happens sometimes, especially after an economic downturn. And then when the economy starts to recover, we start needing teachers again. We don't have enough. So it's possible that your friend could get in, especially at a district with high need, like, for example, Memphis or Nashville. Those school districts here in Tennessee are often in need of teachers badly enough that they will take someone without an education degree if you are working toward an education degree, but you can't teach without one on a long-term basis. And in history is not usually a field they struggle to find teachers in. There are more of those than they have need for. And so probably your friend will not be eligible to apply for a job unless they have that teaching certification. And if he didn't do it as an undergraduate, he'll need to do the master's.
All right. I hope that answered your question. Our next question is, how do you balance family and your profession?
Sometimes not very well. I have 2 little kids, and fortunately, I have a very supportive spouse, and he is a stay-at-home dad, so he picks up a lot of the slack for me. I have seen other teachers do this better than I do. I am frequently at school until 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and that's not good when you're trying to raise children. And that's going to be true in any profession that you enter. You need to be careful to safeguard some of those hours for the people in your life that you love and you take care of. I do not do very well at this. It is a thing that I need to work on better. I have seen many people put a timer on their desk and say, when this timer goes off, if I'm not done with all of my prep and grading, too bad. I go home because, I have people that need me. And I think that that's a skill that we really need to learn to develop.
I definitely agree. Like I've heard from people, like, just kind of like knowing that, like, once you're home, you don't do the stuff at like work. You gotta know to like just break off from that and give yourself. Otherwise, you would be like really, it'll take a toll for sure.
Yeah. And the problem is, I was a student for so long, and I would think, well, it's only for a few years. The end is in sight. So when I graduate, then I can really concentrate. But at this point in my life, there is no ending point, right? If I don't get control of this is what I will do. So yeah, certainly, as a student, you're going to put in a lot of evening hours, but once you're in your career, you really need to learn to strike that balance.
For sure. Oh, one of the attendees, Jacqueline, she says, tell you happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next question is, Can you talk a little bit about what you dislike and like about your career?
Yeah, this was a good week. So right now I'm feeling very positive about my career. There are some weeks where I think, what have I done? Um, the the thing that really struck me actually was just having this thought walking out to my car on Friday, about, and I had a great week and I had some really good positive interactions with kids, and I thought, man, this is the best job. I love this job. And then I thought, that is not always how I feel walking out to my car in the evenings. Um, the thing about this job that's different than others is that every day is so emotional, right? I remember having an office job before, in between my bachelor's and my master's degree. I had a straight up office job where I went to the office and I did editing and proofreading, and there were no emotional ups and downs. There was occasional boredom, and that's all. That's the most emotional I got in a day, right? Here, I can go from a class where kids came in on Fridays. Some of my kids brought me presents and said happy teacher appreciation day, and I thought, oh, this is so, this is what we live for. And then you can go from that to the next class, somebody saying I hate you. And you just, so you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down and and that's both the joy and the difficulty of teaching, right? Because all day long you're going to be working with young humans who themselves are experiencing a lot, and sometimes they bring you a cup of joy and sometimes they bring you bitter dregs. There's just there's no getting around it, but it is always rewarding work, even when it is difficult. So
This week is Teacher Appreciation Week, so if you haven't thanked your teachers, you should definitely go do that. But even if it isn't Teacher Appreciation Week, definitely like your teachers are like doing a lot, and I like always kind of like definitely appreciate them. Just even if it's not Teacher Appreciation Week, I think teachers really deserve to be appreciated a lot more, especially in the U.S.
thank you. That's why we love you.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, do you think STEM-oriented high schools put enough emphasis on English-based courses?
I'm sorry, say that one again. My computer just beeped at me and I missed what you said.
Oh, no problem. Do you think STEM-oriented high schools put enough emphasis on English-based courses?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I have an opinion on that exactly. Oak Ridge is a public institution, and while they put a lot of emphasis on STEM, it's not technically a STEM school. So I don't know. What I do think is that sometimes both students and sometimes just people in general underestimate the importance of language regardless of your career. And I have many friends who are engineers and mathematicians and scientists, and they write all the time. You can't do it if you can't reach the top of your field in any of the STEM fields if you haven't also mastered language. So I do think that as a society and as students, we need to really take those classes just as seriously as the ones that perhaps interest you if you are a STEM student, because you're going to need it.
Yeah, I think a lot of students, they don't think that. They probably just think usually when they think if they're not good with writing, okay, then English is not for them. And like they prefer to like just go with like numbers and just be like, if they see words, they're like, oof, like that.
Yeah. An extended writing. And yet the US News and World Report, the same organization that releases the the top colleges and universities every year, they also do a yearly survey with employers, and they ask them what skills they most want to emphasize for university students entering the work field, and writing is always in the top two. Sometimes it's number one, sometimes it's number two, but it's always up there. So it doesn't matter what field you're entering, your employer wants you to know how to write. So
Great. So this leads into our next question. What are some necessary, useful skills to have? Like I know writing is definitely one of them, but what are some other skills that would be really helpful to have before entering this field?
Certainly being a critical reader, right? You need to read a lot. You can't really enter this field unless you can read a text critically and well and relatively quickly. Because I'm not a enormously fast reader. I just read a lot, and so I cover a lot of material in my day. Um, but being able to read critically and recognize the most important points, practice that annotation, um, and and be able to take notes. Those are all really important, I think. Yeah.
Great. So next question from the audience. What is it like being a professor? Do you get to interact a lot with students, or is it more about grading tests and researching and like that?
That depends a bit on where you teach. So this is a thing that that I think a lot of people don't know is the different kinds of universities, and so consequently the different expectations on professors. So if you are teaching at what we call an R1 university, a Research One university, then as a tenure track professor, this is the other thing is that I think a lot of people don't know the different levels of professors. Should I talk about that? Should I tell you what those are?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so there are different levels of professorship. And when you guys am I talking mostly to high school students about to go to college?
I would say they're mostly high school students.
Okay. So as you guys get ready to enter college, you will have classes with different levels of professors, and depending on what universities you've chosen, some universities will have more of one kind of class and some of another. So if you are going to a major R1 university, a research one, like for example, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, that's a major R1 university, then as a freshman undergraduate, many of your classes are not going to be taught by tenure track professors. They are going to be taught by either graduate students, people who are working on their PhDs, and so they're teaching in order to pay their tuition, or by adjunct professors. And adjunct professors are sort of, they're itinerant professors. They might teach a couple of courses at UT, and they might teach a couple of courses at Pellissippi, and they might teach it. So they they pick up courses wherever they can, and they're paid by the course. And many of them are excellent teachers. The thing that you have to keep in mind about that, though, is that is not, they're probably teaching a lot. In order to make a living doing that kind of teaching, you have to teach, 4 or 5 or 6, sometimes 7 courses in a semester in order to make a living doing that. And so they're really very busy and strapped. Now, as you start heading up through the ranks, so you get to your junior and your senior years, you're in your specialty courses, that's when you'll be taught by full professors. And even within actual like full-time professors hired by the university, there are different ranks. So there are lecturers. They are hired on a year-by-year basis, but they are paid a full-time salary with benefits. And then above that are the tenure track professors. And in tenure track positions, there are 3 levels. The first is called an assistant professor. They're not assisting anyone. It's a misnomer. It's a very old terminology. That's a high rank for a professor. To be an assistant professor means you're tenure track, but it's the opening line of tenure track professor. And then the next level is associate professor. That means that you have published enough and have been there long enough to step up to the rank of associate professor. And then finally, with a minimum, depending on the school, of 5 or 10 years of service, plus the publication of at least 1 book and several articles, you can step up to the rank of full professor. Full professors will mostly be teaching graduate students. They will not be teaching undergraduate courses, except occasionally. So if you get a chance to do that from one of those sort of top professors at UT, that's quite a privilege. It doesn't mean they'll be a good teacher, but it does mean they'll be a great scholar. And this is another thing that sometimes surprises students when they enter the university, is that your professors, especially if they're in tenure track, they are not teachers, they're professors, they're scholars first. So they may never have had, in fact, any pedagogy courses, any courses about teaching. Now, I think that I would say in the last decade or so, people are putting greater and greater emphasis on the quality of teaching, even from full professors. But still, I think you'll notice quite a difference. There's going to be a lot of lecture, not a lot of hands-on experience. Some of you might think that they are boring. And that's not true. Some of them are dynamic speakers, of course, but teaching is not their calling, right? Scholarship is their calling. And at least half of their time is expected in an R1 university like UT, at least half of their time is expected to be spent in research and publication. And so that's a big difference for them from your high school teachers who are, remember, taught very heavily in courses that teach them how to teach. Many of your professors will never have had such a course. So everything they've picked up, they just picked up. That's how I did it. I never had a pedagogy course until I went back and did my master's degree in education. So, well, that's not entirely true. I had some writing pedagogy courses, but anyway, it's a little bit different. And now I've lost the tenor of your question. I forgot what you asked me in the first place.
Oh, no, it was, I think I forgot how to. Just, yeah, just what was like being professor? Like, they just wanted to know like where you get to interact a lot more with students.
Oh yeah, with students. Yeah. So if you go to a smaller college, you will interact with professors a great deal more, because they don't hire as many adjuncts. They do still hire some, and they don't have as many graduate students that are teaching courses. So if you've chosen a small liberal arts college, you'll interact with your teachers a great deal more. And because I was teaching at a liberal arts college, our publication requirements were fewer. We still had them. We still were expected to research and publish, but not nearly as much because our teaching load was heavier. And so I did get to interact with students a great deal more. And one of the nice things about college is that is much less regulated than it is at the high school level. So for example, even when I was a professor, I really loved working with the students. That's always been my favorite part of teaching. And so I would have students over to my house for game nights and dinner. We always had our final exam and presentations at my house so that I could cook them dinner. And I miss that. That was fun. Yeah. You know, I had a student recover from surgery at my house, and I had a student when she was homeless for a while living in my basement. And, you know, so there was always sort of the rules for that are just looser because they're grown-ups and adults at this point. And so you can have them over and, you know, be friends, which was nice.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you brought up this point about like the interacting with your students, because I think now in high school, also just because of now a lot of classes are just virtual, I think the connection between students and teachers is definitely has distance a lot more. And I think also just for students, especially like the thing with office hours, like I think it's difficult for students to just go to a teacher or like for help sometimes, like even like for example teachers and like professors will probably like offer like tutoring and other help, but I think for students it can be intimidating, like they feel like going there alone, and like that is kind of like really hard for them. Do you have any advice for students or like in terms of like that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because certainly I think you're right. You know, I had office hours when I was a professor. I had this big, beautiful office that I would sit in for most of the day, and no students would come for office hours. And that wasn't always true. You know, there was always that cadre of students that after they start to get comfortable with you that would come and hang out in your office sometimes. But what I would tell you is that when your professors say they have office hours, they mean it. Go see them if you have any questions. They really do. They really do want you to come. And that is a way to build that relationship that makes it so much better, both for them and for you. That the whole learning process is much better. As you know from this this god awful school year where we've been so distanced from each other. It's so much better to learn from someone you know and have a relationship with. So go and build that relationship. It will take courage. You're right, to just walk in and ask a question, or just say, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself, just talk for a minute. It feels awkward, but it's worthwhile. Yeah.
Like here, like everyone else here, you guys are probably students. I definitely recommend taking advantage of going to like office hours, like or before school for help. Like you might feel like you don't need it, or like you might just be afraid of like just by going, that'll show that you don't understand something and you don't want to be perceived as that. But like it's really helpful. Like your teachers are there to teach you. Like they wouldn't be teach like they're not expecting you to know this stuff. That's why they're there. So definitely take advantage of that.
There have
So
been
our
many times where I've thought that everyone understood a concept because nobody dared to tell me that they didn't. And then finally somebody says like, Dr. Morton, we don't know what you're talking about. And then everybody's like, yes, we don't know. That's really helpful. Somebody needs to be brave because we don't know sometimes that you don't know unless you tell us.
yeah, that I definitely like understand that. Like just like we've just silence, like the not understanding what to like just like pretend we kind of understand, and like after later maybe like ask help from friends, like go on YouTube or just search. We don't want to deal with the embarrassment of like being in class and you being the one to say you don't understand and maybe everybody else understands. You don't want to like that feeling of like maybe I'm not as smart as everyone, or I don't understand as much as everyone. So I think that's awesome. But like don't be afraid, you're still in high school. Like after high school, like you might ask that question, but like a week from now nobody's going to remember that you asked that question. That might hurt you a bit, but like don't be afraid to ask the question.
Yes.
Okay, so our next question is, what is the most frustrating part of being a high school teacher?
The grading. Oh God, I hate grading so bad. It's the worst. And I didn't have to do nearly as much of it as a college professor. That's the thing you guys should know. Your workload, it's not that it's lighter, it's just that it's in bigger chunks. So instead of a whole bunch of little assignments that you're turning in all the time, you're going to do like, 2 massive papers and 2 massive exams. And you better be ready for them, because if you flunk them, there's no earning it back through all these little assignments. So I miss that. I miss only having those, just those occasional things to grade. But in reality, I mean, that's nothing much. The hardest part of being a teacher at the high school is when you can't make those connections with kids, and you can't. Sometimes they've got things going on in their lives that have nothing to do with you, and sometimes personalities just don't mesh together. But that's always sort of painful, because if you've really invested your heart and soul in a job, you want to do it well, and you want to be able to reach people, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and that can be quite painful.
Okay, so our next question is, are there any expectations you had about your career that you found that was different from reality in both a good or a bad way?
That's a good question. I need to think about that one for a second. Yes. So let me tell you about being a professor and how different that was from what I thought that was going to be. So I wanted to do it because I was a reader, right? I mean, I read all the time. I read 5 to 7 novels a week for most of my life. I just read while other people were doing other fun stuff. I just read. So that's why I thought this would be the perfect job for me. In my mind, we were just going to be reading and talking about books, and in truth, that is sort of what you do, but you're reading and talking about not always the books you want to be reading, right? So because you're teaching a class about 19th century literature, and that's not necessarily what I would be reading for fun, just left to myself. So, but also because you have to read it as the professor so intensively so that you can create discussion questions and you can guide students through the nuances of the literature. So you have to read it with such focus that in some ways it stripped the joy of reading from me. And I went from when I was an undergraduate, from reading that much all the time, just reading all the time. When I started teaching and started actually, guiding students through reading literature, I almost entirely stopped reading for fun. And I missed it quite a lot. So if you think that you want to become an English professor because you love reading, they understand that some of that love for reading is going to be stripped away from you because your reading is going to take on a whole different thing. Now it's going to be replaced by something else, by this love for analysis and sort of minutia, but you will not be reading just for fun anymore ever again. Which is sort of painful. Now I've gotten that back a little bit as a high school teacher because how many times can you teach The Great Gatsby? I got that, I don't have to focus so much on that. So I can do that with half my brain and the other half I can give to literature that I just want to read. High school came with a number of surprises. The first time that I stepped between students who were in a fight and got punched, or the first time somebody told me to F off, or these are not things that I expected to happen. I don't know why. I went to high school. I know these things happen, and yet still it was sort of shocking and surprising that they happened to me. But they do. That's just part of the gig. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, that will lead on to a similar question. Maybe aspects of your career that may be challenging or surprising, for others that are heading, that in going to this career that, you might want them to take into consideration, like some surprises that might pop up or some challenges. I know you gave some examples, but you can elaborate more?
Yeah. So don't go in being naive. Being a high school teacher is hard. It's absolutely the hardest job I've ever had. And I've had many, many jobs. So it is definitely the hardest, mostly because it's so emotional and your emotions are very, very involved in what you're doing. But I have also been surprised and delighted. So I've told you some of the bad things, but I don't want you to think that that's all there is either, because my students are lovely and so many of them are so wonderful. I went to prom last night and all of these wonderful kids came up and to show me their beautiful dresses and to say hi, and I took pictures and even danced with a few of them, and it was this is part of the reward of this job too, and kids come to my classroom every day and we make tea for lunch. And I love this. I love that we have these little tea parties and that I get to be a part of these wonderful kids' lives. I love them. I feel like I have every year 120 children, so it is an enormously, so this I was not expecting either, for it to be quite such an emotional reward, but it is. It's a wonderful job. Don't go in naively thinking that it's always wonderful. It is many, many times painful and hard, but it is definitely worth it.
That is so nice to hear. So our next question from the audience is, what is your favorite thing about teaching English class specifically?
Ooh, English classes specifically. At this point in my career, I think I could be happy teaching absolutely anything because it really is that sort of relationship. But I do love, I do love about English that you get to talk about ideas, I really like math. I think math is fun. It's puzzly and it's, you get to solve puzzles, but I like being able to really explore the meaning of life. I mean, it probably sounds cliche, but that's what I get to do with kids. We get to read all of these really profound things and watch profound ideas occur in not just theirs, but in my own intellectual life as well. And that's a thing that I couldn't live without. I need that continual intellectual challenge and growth. I wouldn't be happy if I were just teaching by rote every day. I like the challenge of being able to learn new things and think in new ways and have those aha moments, those epiphanies where, you experience that moment of sublimity or truth. I love getting to experience that with students and watching them have those. That's my favorite thing about teaching English.
Lovely. So our next question from the audience is, have you noticed a change in the use of literary works by minority authors incorporated in the language curriculums taught in high schools and universities?
Have I noticed a change in how much we are offering
And
it?
have you noticed a change in the use of literary works by minority authors incorporated in the language curriculums?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a very, very positive way. So when I first started, I mentioned that I was an 18th centuryist. That's what my training is. And so my degrees are all in very old, dead white guys. And when I say guys, I mean that literally men, right? White Christian men. That's who was primarily included in the curriculum for decades, possibly centuries. And one of the things that I love is the expansion of what we call the canon. The canon are those works that we consider sort of the great works, and the expansion of that canon to include more women and minority voices. I think that has really enriched our teaching. I used to have to work hard in creating a syllabus at the university. If I was teaching 17th or 18th or 19th century literature, it was very easy to create my syllabus and then look back at it and realize that I had included only white men. And that's it. And I would have to purposefully go back and try to find some other voices to put in there. It's much easier now because the anthologies that we use, you guys know that an anthology, right, is the compilation of the works that an editor or an editorial board consider the great works of that period. The anthologies are much more diverse now. They have taken greater care to include some of those diverse voices, and I think we are all richer for it. We get more of those epiphanic moments, right, when we experience the world through someone else's eyes that is different from us, and we need that variety of voices to develop the kind of intellectual and empathetic intellect that we need in our scholars and our thinkers. So I love the increasing diversity of those voices in literature.
Thank you. And I think also the second part of like that question also is in probably like the difference of like the works in like high school versus universities. Like at universities, are the works more diverse in ideas, or would you say like I think from what you explained previously, I think you're more flexible in choosing the books for university versus than in high school. Do you have like any thoughts on like the choice of literary works for students in high school versus in universities?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely, that's true. Part of this is we're constrained at the high school level by notions of propriety, I suppose. And it's not that I'm trying to be critical of that particular notion. There are ideas that high school students are not ready for, and that are going to be too difficult for them, too painful, too adult. The language might be too problematic. We don't worry about that at the college level. I remember my first year of teaching high school. I'm going to tell a story on myself. My students wanted to watch a movie, and I had never had to worry about this before, because at college I can show whatever movie I want. I could show a rated X movie, whatever. So I'd never had to think about this before. And so I'm looking for it was the end of the year. They'd already taken their AP test. So I was like, okay, you can watch a movie. And I say, but it has to be somehow relevant. So we're going to choose a movie that has based on great literature. What do you want to watch? So anyway, somehow we landed on The Scarlet Letter, right? It's a great piece of American literature. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, but the movie has very little relevance to the book. I mean, it's an enormous departure. Things kept happening and I kept thinking like, that's not, that doesn't happen. Where's this story even going? Like it's very, but even worse, I didn't really check the rating. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't probably tell you this story. I had to shut the movie off. Anyway, I didn't continue on once I realized that there's a lot of nudity in this show, and I'm clicking my clicker. I'm trying to shut things down. So, we are constrained at the high school level by choosing books and films that are going to be appropriate for our high schoolers. When you get to college, that is not, you're going to be reading and watching all kinds of things. But also we are constrained a bit at the high school level by tradition. I mean, I don't know how many of you read Julius Caesar in your sophomore year, or The Great Gatsby in your junior year, or To Kill a Mockingbird in your freshman year. But guess what? I read those things 30 years ago. So we are sort of, we're locked in this tradition that has persisted for decades and that we have a hard time getting out of. We have this list of great works that we consider appropriate for high school, and we just keep teaching them. And the college, of course, this is where scholarship is happening. It's an exciting place because it's where people are really on the cutting edge of scholarship, and they feel absolutely free to throw away To Kill a Mockingbird and teach something else more edgy and avant-garde, I suppose. And so in some ways that's really exciting. A lot more diversity is going to happen there, and it trickles down to the high schools very slowly because we're very slow to change our curriculum.
All right, thank you. I think also definitely with now with the change impacted by COVID, I think maybe the education sector might get some changes, and more definitely it'll take a while for sure, but I think it's slowly changing.
Yeah, there's a lot of resistance. Also at the legislative level, a lot of states, the legislators, those who make the laws and decide what we can teach at the high schools, they are also, many of them, older traditionalists. And so, they read The Great Gatsby when they were in juniors in high school, and they want you to do it too. And there's nothing, I love Great Gatsby. I'm not dissing this particular work, but it is for this reason sort of slow to move at this level. Yeah, but I think you're right. I think we're seeing some changes.
We're going to be nearing the end of this, so if you have any last minute questions, be sure to put that into the chat or send them to me directly. Our next question is, are there any misconceptions about this career? I know there are definitely stereotypes about just your job, and but any misconceptions that you think you'd like to clarify after you got into this career, that you realize, hey, this wasn't exactly true or something.
That's a tough question because I'm not sure what perceptions people have anymore of professors or of teachers. Back in the day, wearing very proper. I think that has certainly been done away with, or at least that I no longer harbor that idea. Professors are pretty, they're pretty, they are not very, they're not wedded to tradition, I suppose. This is a career you enter if you really are the kind of person that likes to push the envelope. So be prepared for that when you go into colleges and universities. In general, your professors are going to be the kind of people that like to be on the cutting edge of thought, and so they're going to be pretty largely pretty progressive thinkers and pretty avant-garde kinds of thinkers. Teachers at the high school are a bit more sort of traditional, I suppose. But even still, if I go we're in Tennessee, so the teachers are not quite as wild, but I love to go to the NCTE, the National Council for the Teachers of English, and see all of the teachers with their pink hair and their nose rings, and their English teachers are kind of a wild lot. They're kind of fun. So don't think that we're too boring. I guess that's the misconception. We are a fun lot. Don't you forget it.
Absolutely. I can definitely attest to that. They are some of the most amazing people you would ever meet. Okay, I think we'll probably like do 4 more questions, and we might run a bit over, so if you have to leave, it's completely okay. So our next question is, is there advice that you would give your past self before entering this career?
No, not necessarily. I mean, there are days when I think I wish I could go back in time and just be a doctor, but not really. I really wouldn't have done things differently even if I could. I really enjoyed the entire journey and the whole ride. Maybe I would have told myself to be a bit more prepared for the emotional roller coaster that it was going to be, but it's been a good time, and I have no regrets about it. So, and I studied hard and did well at the university, so I don't have any regrets there either. I wouldn't necessarily need to chastise my young self. So, yeah, I think I made the right choice for me. So
That's great to hear. So our next question is, do you think teaching for AP exams takes away from true education of the language arts?
that is an interesting question. I don't actually. I know that there's a lot of talk about teaching toward the exam, and we use that almost as a slur, and we will say like, well, you're just teaching to the exam. But any goal that you set in life, any goal, like you're working toward that goal. So all an exam is a goal for what you will have learned, right? And of course, you wouldn't just want to amble down the path of learning. Well, that's not necessarily true. Ambling down the path of learning can be really rewarding and lovely, but so can setting a goal and having a specific goal in mind. And I think that the AP test is just a really good goal. It says, by the time I reach this, I will know how to do X, Y, and Z. I have this amount of information that I will have learned. So it helps us to set that goal. As a teacher, I like having a very specific goal to work toward. I think that we still explore all kinds of wonderful and exciting ideas in class as we're working toward that goal, but it gives us a measuring post to make sure that we're getting somewhere valuable and that we're getting the learning in that we wanted to get in. So I think of exams more as goals and less as just a punishment. Now, I do tend to think that there is too much testing in our lives, certainly in our schools. I'm not going to argue about that. But I don't necessarily think that all testing is bad or that teaching toward a test is bad. I think that it's teaching toward a goal.
All right. Our next question from the audience is, besides teaching, because another thing that with being teachers, I know that like teachers aren't paid as much as they probably should be. So this question leads into that. Like, besides teaching, what other high-paying careers could benefit from someone who has a background in the language arts?
So an English major can be really valuable for a lot of things. A lot of people who get a degree in English, an undergraduate degree, go on to do some kind of graduate work. The English degree is one of the top degrees in both, in entering law school. So a lot of people want to do their undergraduate in politics if they are hoping to enter law school, and that's a good choice. But one of the major goals for English majors was law school. A lot of them enter publishing and editing. That's what I did right after my undergraduate degree, I became a editor and a proofreader. And I enjoyed it, actually. It was not high paid, but it was fine. It was an okay career at that time. And I would have moved up through the ranks and made a decent living that way. But also the main thing to keep in mind is just how many jobs there are out there that have no specific degree attached to them, right? You just need a degree. There isn't a specific degree that gets you that job, but what they always need is someone who knows how to write. So if you have an English major, it actually prepares you to apply for all of those kinds of jobs, the ones that you'll need to enter, where they will do the training on site, but they want to know that you know how to write. So certainly you would be paid more than being a teacher. But
like that, like thank you for bringing that up. Like what you major in doesn't determine your career. Like don't think I want to go into this career, I absolutely have to take this major. I have to be in this. Like I know plenty of people who are like their major and their career didn't line up at all, but their major let them kind of like learn from different perspectives that helped their career immensely, that helped them perform even better in that career actually. Okay, so our last question is, do you have any advice and like resources for students that want to look to get more involved? Like if they want to plan to pursue a career in teaching, how can they get involved, or resources they can kind of like start looking at or use?
yeah, especially if you're interested in being an English teacher, that part I know better. The NCTE, the National Council for the Teachers of English, has a student branch. And so if you're interested in being an English teacher, that is absolutely a website that you should visit. It's ncte.org, and they will have a ton of resources for you to help you choose your school and choose your sort of path of curriculum and study, whether you want to do the master's or the bachelor's, but also just a lot of really valuable publications and even a chance for you to publish, especially as an undergraduate, and to attend conferences and things like that. And that is one of the things, as you get into your major, as you enter the university, you will want to find those professional organizations that you can associate yourself with. So I happen to know about the NCTE because I'm in English, but all of the fields have some kind of professional organization that for teachers in that specialization, and you will want to find that organization and join the student branch of that organization, because that will enable you to network and to get the resources that you want to get into a position when you're ready to apply.
Thank you. So